So we'll now move through to our next submitter, who is Roger Dickie New Zealand Limited, who is also joining us online this morning.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to hear us this morning. So my name's Will Dickie from Roger Dickie New Zealand Limited. We're a forestry investment company that looks after around 60,000 hectares of production forestry in New Zealand. So just to keep things quick, I guess, and cover off a couple of points. First of all, we agree that a bill or something to this effect needs to come in. We've always known that an untethered kind of change from land use change from farming or other industries into forestry with the ETS would have ultimately an overrun of forested land. But we think the bill as it's drafted is too blunt in the instruments and in the way that it does it. So a couple of key considerations, I think. One is that the ballot should not be randomised, or the consent, I beg your pardon, should not be randomised, because by doing so, it allows for speculative or kind of potentially the lower land uses or value add uses of potential conversion forestry to happen. So the bill should allow for, if which we think it does, needs to restrict or change how the carbon thing works, it should focus on the right tree in the right place. So the ballot should provide weighting for better tree species, natives or long-lived tree species like redwoods or otherwise. And equally, if it is going to focus on pine, it should be through production forestry, which does have economic benefit proven into the economy, rather than rather than permanent pine forestry, which long term, who knows where that ends up. So we think the bill needs to, one, move away from the speculative part, and then two, focus on putting the best tree in the best place. And forestry does play an important part in New Zealand reducing its emissions goals, or meeting its emission goals. The second piece, I guess, is the OIO consideration. So we have a number of foreign owners that do buy land for production forestry in New Zealand. That's the only way you can buy forested land in New Zealand, is for production. You can't have it as permanent pine forestry. The bill, as it states, suggests that you are unable to apply to go into the emissions trading scheme without being the owner of the land. So I'm interested to understand, if you're a foreign owner or even a New Zealand owner in some of our New Zealand domiciled investment funds, how the purchaser could do modelling and work out a financial performance of a potential forestry investment if you're unsure whether or not you're going to be eligible to get into the emissions trading scheme, because the price you're prepared to pay for a production forest without carbon versus the price you're prepared to pay for a production forest with eligibility in the ETS is materially different. So the investment metrics without that unknown become quite difficult. And I guess, finally, the different rules for Maori landowners compared to other landowners seems, in my view, unfair. So we've all had equal opportunity to convert land into forestry and have it registered in the emissions trading scheme. If there needs to be a carve out for Maori landholders or treaty settlements or whatever it might be, the rules around that should also focus on planting the best tree species. So if there's suitable land and the rule is going to go through this way, it should encourage that that's planted in natives or, again, better tree species rather than permanent pine forestry. I think that's probably all I need to talk through now. There's other pieces in our submission, but I think you've read that. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Will, and thanks for your very thorough submission, both written and orally today. Look, I have Miles Anderson, who's got the first question for you.
Thanks, Will.
Hey, Miles.
So what percentage of the forestry that you look after is production forestry, and what percentage is permanent carbon forestry?
We have about 61,000 hectares under management, and we have nothing registered in permanent forestry. There's 200 hectares of one block that we bought that will probably end up in permanent forestry in pine because we can't get across the river. It's uneconomic to harvest it. We don't have any permanent pine forestry apart from that 200 hectares.
Okay, and what would you spend per hectare on weed and pest control?
It depends on the age and stage of the tree. So a newly planted forest, a second rotation forest, or a young forest, you have to do a lot of goat, possum and deer culling, right? Because they eat the tips on the new growth.
Yep.
When a forest is more mature, those numbers back off. There's not the food source there for them. So that number varies.
Thank you. We'll move to Steve Abel now with a question.
Yeah, thank you for your substantive submission. How else could the random ballot that you've spoken against, how else could you do a planned allocation of land for that than the random ballot, do you think? Have you got any ideas around that?
Well, you should just be able to apply to put in much the same in a way, not that the LIO, you put in a consent to convert land to forestry. You should be able to put in a consent to a panel that considers the merits of the investment. Is the land suitable? Are the tree species good for it long term? Based on the merit and the benefit to New Zealand or the wider economy, that could be approved or declined. And in the same way as a foreigner, when they look to invest in production forestry in New Zealand, outside of the special forestry test, you had to prove the general benefit to New Zealand. So something along those lines. At the moment, it favours anyone just throwing a ticket in. We're not solving the problem here, in my view.
Could it be that, to your other point about the value of diversified, longer-lived species, that perhaps only applications for diversified, longer-lived species could be used in the ballot?
Well, it's all about right tree, right place, right? You have to have... There are some areas that are not suitable to pine or whatever it might be and should go back to native, and that should be incentivized to happen on the right land classes. But equally, there are areas where pine is a good tree crop. New Zealand's the best place in the world for growing pine. The world needs it to live and build in. So we've got to balance that right species in the right place.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, I've got a question. You talk about in the submission that the bill fails to distinguish between forestry types and effectively treating long-lived, rotational and diversified forests the same. Can you just elaborate a little further on that concern?
Well, your previous submitters, there's been a theme saying, hey, there's too much forestry going in and it's low value, it's carbon forestry, i.e. there's no harvesting or money going back around the cycle into the New Zealand economy. And the bill has a real opportunity to say, hey, let's not plant the species, or let's not allow permanent pine forestry, which probably doesn't, the numbers say, does not add as much value back into the economy as permanent forestry. So here's the opportunity to say, right, we're going to meet our obligations. We needed our 1 billion trees or our 600,000 hectares or whatever the new meaning of that is. We can now do that with a tree species that's focused on the right place and the right land and has other economic benefits outside of just storing carbon. A harvesting forest or a forest in a cycle spends materially more money going back round through the economy than a carbon forest and than a sheep and beef farmer. So if you have whole areas where there's an average age of trees, you're always going to have money going around the economy. And general forestry workers are paid more than sheep and beef farmers. So the economy, it does stimulate the economy. It might be a different type of farmer, but it's still a farmer and it's still work happening. And the carbon credits, New Zealand's a closed system, so foreigners can't buy New Zealand carbon credits to offset their foreign emissions. That's just an absolute misnomer out there.
Look, thank you very much. We'll have to leave it there. Thanks for your submission today. Appreciate your time.
Hey, I'm happy to take a call or talk to anyone afterwards if they have further questions or queries. But thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
The different rules for Maori landowners compared to other landowners seems, in my view, unfair. So we've all had equal opportunity to convert land into forestry and have it registered in the emissions trading scheme. If there needs to be a carve out for Maori landholders or treaty settlements or whatever it might be, the rules around that should also focus on planting the best tree species. So if there's suitable land and the rule is going to go through this way, it should encourage that that's planted in natives or, again, better tree species rather than permanent pine forestry.